Hello there folks and welcome to my Retro Mini Room. Today we're looking at 5 more PlayStation 3 games that are still stuck on the PlayStation 3. This is part 3 of the series I've been doing where we take a look at games that are classics yet they've been abandoned by Sony. It's unfortunate these games deserve remakes or remasters or at the very least just simply re-released on current consoles so that we can relive these classics. Now a few of you might point out the fact that on PlayStation Plus you're able to stream these games. I hardly count that because it's really a lousy way to re-experience them. They tend to play inferior to native hardware. If you like this sort of content, please hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, and the like button to help me with the algorithm. Please comment on the video. I'd love to hear from you all. I read every comment and I reply to nearly all of them. With that, we'll get started. And to start our list, we're taking a look at 2009's Infamous, developed by Sucker Punch Productions and released by Sony. So my play experience with Infamous as a series has been a little bit out of order. The first Infamous I truly played and beat was Infamous Second Son on the PlayStation 4, which is going to be in a future video. That is a fantastic game. That was the first AAA game that I played on the PlayStation 4 and loved it. So for me, this has been going back in time to re-experience the original Infamous games because I didn't really play them originally. For those not familiar, Sucker Punch was responsible for the Sly Cooper series on the PlayStation 2, as well as Ghost of Tsushima on PlayStation 4. So they are certainly known for putting out quality titles. The story of Infamous quite literally starts with a bang. A massive explosion takes out a large portion of the fictional Empire City. In the crater of the explosion, you wake up as protagonist Cole McGrath. Waking up dazed and confused, he doesn't understand who caused the explosion or why, and then quickly discovers he has acquired new powers based on electricity, where he's able to absorb and project electricity at high levels. With many people within Empire City suspecting him of causing the explosion and being a terrorist, with the help of FBI agent Moya Jones, him and his best friend Zeke seek out to clear his name and figure out who caused the explosion. For Sucker Punch, taking everything they had learned from developing Sly Cooper and borrowing from the likes of Hulk Ultimate Destruction, they set out to make a superhero game in a sandbox environment, where you actually have the option of having good or bad karma. You can be good or evil. While it doesn't drastically change the story from my understanding, it does allow you to play in more the style you choose. You can be ruthless and evil, or you can actually try to help and save people. That's actually really fun. And it does affect what abilities you can and can't use, kind of like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic with your Force abilities. Now I'm going to be honest and fair about the visuals here. Overall, it's a mixed bag for me. Now obviously, sandbox games at that time had to make certain sacrifices. They weren't able to be the visual splendor the likes of Killzone 2, which came out that same year and is clearly in a different league in terms of visual splendor. So there's ways that Infamous is quite impressive and other ways it's rough around the edges. The particle effects are very impressive, the lighting effects are very nice, Cole's animations are great, overall Empire City looks quite good. Where it falters in some ways are the performance, the frame rate can be pretty rough, screen tearing can be prevalent, the facial animations are dated, city NPCs running around like chickens with their heads cut off can look pretty cartoonish. So like I said, it's a mixed bag. But where the game really does shine is in the gameplay. Running around as Cole with your superhuman abilities is a lot of fun. Scaling buildings, fighting off gang members, and there's a lot of different powers to unlock throughout the game. Because of this being a sandbox game, you have side missions, primary missions, everything you would expect, and it does have a pretty solid story. And the characters are quite likable, so this has a lot going for it. There's a reason why people love this series so much. I'm really surprised at myself that I didn't get into Infamous originally back in the day because I loved Hulk Ultimate Destruction. So this should have been right up my alley, I just never got around to it. And it really is important to play the first game before getting to our next title. 2011's Infamous 2. The story of Infamous 2 takes place a mere month after the first game, so this is a direct sequel where you continue the story of Cole McGrath, who is now voiced by a different voice actor, who I think is even better. Where I talked about the first game being a bit of a mixed bag in the visuals department, the second game is a step up in every possible way. More stable frame rate, less screen tearing, better physics and detail. The character models and facial animations are a huge step up from the first game, along with solid voice acting. Whereas the first Infamous in Empire City was more of a metropolitan feeling area, Infamous 2 takes place in the swamp of Louisiana, particularly New Marais, which is like New Orleans. While it's still very much a city, it has a very different feel and visual aesthetic to it, which I think is pretty cool. It changes up quite a bit from the first game. The upgrades don't just apply to some of the tech, they also apply to the feel of the gameplay and controls. Your melee combat in particular feels way better than the first game. The melee combat was good in the first game, but it's awesome in this one. More dramatic camera angles, better hit detection, it's just easier and better flowing. So Sucker Punch didn't just merely put you in a new setting and call it part 2, they really did improve on everything here. While Spider-Man 2 and Hulk Ultimate Destruction set many standards for the superhero sandbox genre, Infamous expanded on it and raised the bar. Infamous took everything in a more mature and darker direction, and is still influencing games to this day. With multiple maps to explore, a single cohesive story, good characters and dialogue, fun high-octane superhero-style action with powers, you cannot go wrong with Infamous 1 and 2. After all these years of not playing these, I can see why they have such a fan following. But before we move on to the next title, we need to mention the Festival of Blood DLC, which is an expansion of Infamous 2, just like Undead Nightmare on Red Dead Redemption. With Halloween right around the corner, Festival of Blood is great for Halloween, just like Undead Nightmare. It's pretty much a spoof or tale that Zeke tells to a woman at a bar about New Moray being taken over by vampires. Cole McGrath himself has now become a vampire, and you're trying to figure out what to do before sunup. So everything takes place at night, and just like Undead Nightmare, everything is altered to have more of a horror movie feel to it. Everything is dark, colors are different, the ambience is different, the atmosphere is completely different. That's why this is great for Halloween. You actually have to drink blood to maintain your power, you fight other vampires. It's a wild ride. It's a lot of fun. Just like Undead Nightmare, this is a really solid expansion that I actually didn't know too much about until people were telling me about it. Now that I've played it, I can see why. What's really nice about all these is that all 3 games are downloadable as a collection for only $15 in the PlayStation 3 store. I highly recommend you check it out that way. That's the fastest, cheapest, easiest way to get a hold of these. Up next, we have 2008's Pacific Rift, developed by Evolution Studios and released by Sony. In part 2 of this PlayStation 3 series, I already covered Motorstorm Apocalypse, which I enjoyed, but I didn't like it quite as much as the first Motorstorm. Pacific Rift, on the other hand, which is the second in the series, so this is a little out of order, I really like Pacific Rift. I think there's a good argument here that this is the best in the series. Just like the first Motorstorm, you're able to just really pick up and play this game right into the main menu. You start racing, earning points, unlocking courses, unlocking more vehicles. Just like in the first game, your selection of vehicles is somewhat limited, but once you get the motorcycle, that's when things get really fun. Oddly enough, the motorcycle in Pacific Rift is much better than Apocalypse in my opinion. It was okay in Apocalypse, but I wasn't thrilled with it. This, on the other hand, I was having an absolute blast. On the other end of the spectrum, I really enjoyed driving the tanker, which for a tanker was surprisingly good to control and a lot of fun. So there's a vehicle for everybody here. Not every vehicle's equal, not every vehicle's for everybody, but that's the point. You kind of find what works for you. The graphics here are absolutely fantastic, a total showpiece for the PlayStation 3, just like the first game and like Apocalypse as well. The course design is really awesome, just as good if not better than the first game. You have the same physics and chaos and unpredictability of the AI in the courses, and the AI is very aggressive and challenging. You have that same rewarding feeling of beating courses just like in the first game. This is an absolute thrill ride as a racer. Now, at first, I was kind of thinking, the soundtrack is not quite as good as the first one. It's okay. It felt a little bit generic. At first, I thought it wasn't even licensed music. But then I heard Move Through Me from In Flames start playing in the menu. Then I took the soundtrack seriously. As you would expect, you have multiple riders to choose from, multiple vehicle skins to choose from. There's all sorts of stuff to unlock. But it really is pure in its simplicity, and I really appreciate that. While Apocalypse had a really robust customization mode that I did praise it for, I still just like the purity of this game. There's just something about it. Fantastic graphics, solid controls, thrilling course designs, tons of vehicles, motorcycle being a highlight for me, some cool tracks in the music. You cannot go wrong with Pacific Rift, and like I said, I think there's an argument that this is the best Motorstorm in the series. Hopefully we'll see a remaster at some point. Up next, we have the remaster of ICO, the original game developed by Team ICO, and this remaster developed by Bluepoint Games and released by Sony. So this ICO remaster is actually within the bundle of ICO and Shadow of the Colossus. Now, Shadow of the Colossus is not stuck on the PlayStation 3. That actually has a PlayStation 4 remaster, which is actually fantastic, and also from Bluepoint. But unfortunately, ICO has been left behind on PlayStation 3. That was the last iteration of it. Now, it is originally a PlayStation 2 game, and I've been playing it since it originally came out on PlayStation 2, and I've always loved ICO. I remember back in the day how this was one of the main games that brought up the discussion of are games art? And I think ICO is a resounding yes. The atmosphere, ambience, and soundtrack. There's always been something really special with ICO. Graphically, the game was a powerhouse for the PlayStation 2 at the time, and it still holds up on the PlayStation 3. With it being a remaster, the frame rate is enhanced, so it's much more consistent than the original, the resolution is a lot higher, and the textures and details are better. So this was a solid remaster. Bluepoint are amazing at what they do. Some of the reasons why ICO sparked the discussion of our game's art was because this is not your conventional game. It's not like your typical action-adventure, RPG, dungeon crawler, or whatever. It has its own feel and type of gameplay. The game introduces you to a boy named ICO, who was born with horns and was considered cursed by his village, so they banished him to a remote castle. Once ICO frees himself, that's when you begin exploring the castle, trying to figure out what to do. The game introduces you to the physical puzzles of the game, getting through the castle, figuring out how to progress in the castle. But where it gets interesting is where you meet a young mysterious girl named Yorda. Upon meeting her, he decides he wants to help her along the way. And that's where some really unique mechanics were introduced at the time, particularly the hand-holding mechanic. You quite literally physically grab Yorda's hand and you take her with you wherever you're going, you guide her along, you call to her to come to you, you help her over ledges. It is your mission to protect and help her, and figure out what's going on with her, because she really is a mysterious girl. You don't know what's going on yet. All along the way, you have these mysterious shadowy creatures trying to capture her, and that's where the combat kicks in. You actually do fight them off. Now, it's not super in-depth combat, but it is nice. Throughout most of the game, you have a stick, and you just merely whack at them, fight them off, put things in place in order to progress to the next part, climbing. The game is pretty good at feeling rewarding for figuring out the castle and the physical puzzles and how to get through it, as well as protecting Yorda. There's just a certain beauty to the game, there always has been. If you're a fan of Shadow of the Colossus, you really owe it to yourself to check out ICO, because Shadow of the Colossus is actually considered a spiritual prequel to ICO set in the same world, according to the original creator Fumito Ueda. Or if you just love that graphics engine and art style, because it's all the same here. So if you want something that's unique and atmospheric, you should check out ICO. It's a classic. And finally, we have Medal of Honor Frontline. Originally developed by EA Los Angeles, and this PlayStation 3 port was developed by Danger Close Games and released by EA. So there are two ways you're able to play Frontline on your PlayStation 3. Either by downloading it for $10 off the PlayStation Store, which is the easiest and cheapest way, or you're able to play it off of the disc of the limited edition of Medal of Honor 2010, which was a Modern Warfare reboot of the franchise, which is actually very cool for collectors. So the original version of Frontline came out on the PlayStation 2 in May of 2002, then the Xbox and GameCube versions came out that November. So there's an 8-year gap between this port and those original versions. It's really fascinating how this HD Remaster or HD re-release of the game is exclusive to PlayStation 3, even though it was a multi-platform title originally. This is a very unique version of Frontline, and I thought it'd be interesting to talk about. There are actually quite a few enhancements to the visuals. Lighting effects, depth of field, motion blur, enhanced textures. They actually did quite a bit to the graphics. Due to all these enhancements and not just straight porting it, the performance does hurt a little bit. The frame rate's not the best, and there's a lot of screen tearing. Additionally, the aspect ratio isn't right. They merely took the original 4:3 and stretched it into kind of a pseudo 16:9, so everything looks stretched and flat. So this is definitely a flawed port of the game, but interesting nonetheless. Probably the biggest change that many people are going to appreciate is the ability to aim down sights that wasn't in the original game with the modern control scheme options. Me personally, I'm okay with the original style, but many other people are going to like that. At the end of the day, Frontline is a classic first-person World War II shooter. Even though Medal of Honor on the PlayStation 1 established this subgenre, Frontline redefined it. The D-Day opening level in Frontline, just like Saving Private Ryan did in film, raised the bar to a whole new level. Which makes sense since Steven Spielberg was behind all of it from day one. Even with all of the flaws from this HD remaster, the game itself still holds up really well. The sound design is very good in this game, while not perfect in terms of sometimes sounds overlap each other, but each individual recorded sound sounds really awesome. To this day, it is still an enjoyable early 2000s classic shooter. The guns are fun, the sniper rifle in particular I've always enjoyed and it's still good. Unloading on enemies with the MP40, there's lots of fun to be had. This is still a classic game. If you've never played it and you want to check it out, this is still an interesting way to play it, even though it is flawed. But honestly, any way that you play Frontline, whether it be PS2, Xbox, GameCube, or this version, doesn't matter, it's still a classic title. So that was 5 PlayStation 3 games that are still stuck on the PlayStation 3, with the last one being a little bit of an oddball one, but I just wanted to talk about it. Please like and subscribe. If you want some more Halloween content, please check out my most recent video. I cover 5 games that you should check out for Halloween. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.